It was Tuesday night when I first noticed something was wrong. Grace usually came home around 6:30 p.m., but by 8 p.m., there was still no sign of her. No call, no text, just silence. The chicken parmesan I had prepared, her favorite dish, sat cooling on the dining table, candles burning down to stumps. Our anniversary dinner, forgotten. 11 years of marriage, celebrated alone. I tried calling her cell for the third time, but it went straight to voicemail again. That knot in my stomach tightened as the minutes ticked by, transforming from mild concern to something more primal, more urgent. The windows darkened as night fell completely, and still, our suburban home remained half empty. At 9:17 p.m., I received a text message. Working late with Color. Don't wait up. 6 words. 6 simple words that wouldn't normally raise any eyebrows. But after 11 years of marriage, you develop a sixth sense about these things. Something in those words felt hollow, manufactured. The timestamp itself was suspicious. Who sends a working late message nearly 3 hours after they should have been home? And on our anniversary? I set my phone down on our kitchen counter and stared at the half-eaten dinner I'd prepared. Salmon with roasted vegetables, now cold and congealed on the plate. The wine bottle stood open but barely touched, breathing uselessly into empty space. I'm Ethan Reed, 38, financial analyst at Hammond and Pierce in Chicago. I specialize in patterns, finding them, analyzing them, predicting from them. My colleagues joke that I can spot a financial irregularity from a mile away. The human calculator, they call me, though never to my face. The promotion to senior analyst last year came with a corner office overlooking Michigan Avenue, a substantial raise and increasingly longer hours that Grace had initially complained about. And lately, the patterns in my marriage had shifted in ways too consistent to ignore, too precise to be coincidental, too structured to be random fluctuations in a healthy relationship. The late nights had become more frequent, starting about 7 months ago. The intimate conversations had dwindled to logistical exchanges about groceries and bills. The spontaneous weekend trips to Michigan's wine country had been replaced by her girls' retreats that somehow never produced any photos, despite Grace being notorious for documenting every moment of our vacations together. And then there were those hushed phone calls she took outside on our back patio, laughing in ways she no longer laughed with me, bright musical laughter that used to be the soundtrack of our early years together, now performed for someone else's benefit. Sometimes she would come back inside with flushed cheeks, blaming the reaction on an amusing client anecdote when I asked. We'd built a respectable life in our suburban Chicago neighborhood of Evanston, a 4-bedroom Victorian house we could barely afford when we bought it, now comfortably within our means thanks to our advancing careers. The kitchen renovation last year had been featured in a local home magazine, Grace's proudest accomplishment. No kids. We'd tried for 3 painful years, endured 2 miscarriages, and eventually accepted our childless state with a resignation that felt like relief to us both. The second miscarriage had nearly broken us, but we recovered, or at least developed the ability to step around the cracks in our foundation. Our friends envied our freedom, our dual income, our seemingly uncomplicated life. The perfect couple, they called us at dinner parties and neighborhood barbecues. Brandon and Melissa from across the street had even asked us to give a speech at their wedding last summer, as though we possessed some secret formula for marital success. But nothing is ever as it seems from the outside. Behind closed doors, our conversations had grown shorter. Our Sunday brunches on the patio had disappeared from the schedule. Our intimacy more perfunctory, when it happened at all. The space between us and our king-size bed had widened from inches to what felt like miles of cold Egyptian cotton desert. That night, as I lay in our empty bed, listening to the occasional car passing outside our window, I remembered something I'd set up years ago and had almost forgotten. When we merged our digital lives early in our marriage, I had created a shared cloud storage account. I was the admin, and I had enabled full synchronization with our devices. At the time, it was just a convenient way to share photos and documents, a practical solution for a practical couple. We were both organized people who appreciated efficiency. It was one of the things that had drawn us together at that charity fundraiser where we met. Her administrative precision complemented my analytical mind. I got up, walked to my home office, and opened my laptop. The soft blue glow illuminated the room as I navigated to our shared cloud account. 3 clicks and I was in our cloud storage, looking at the automatic backup of her text messages. My heart pounded against my ribcage as I navigated through the folders. A part of me hoped I was wrong, that my suspicions were just paranoia, born from the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. Another part already knew what I would find. The human calculator had already added up the evidence. What I found turned my blood to ice. Miss you already. Can still taste you. Cole Sanders, 10:42 p.m. Cole Sanders, her boss at the marketing firm where she'd worked for the past 5 years. The man who had been to our house for dinner parties, who had brought his wife Amanda and made polite conversation while stealing glances at my wife across our dining room table. The man who had shaken my hand firmly while looking me directly in the eyes, commenting on my barbecue technique as if we were friends. The man who had complimented our home renovation, standing in the very living room he was helping to destroy. The man who had once drunkenly confided in me about the pressures of running a marketing department during an economic downturn, as though we were compatriots in the struggle of corporate America. I scrolled through months of messages, each one more explicit than the last. Hotel reservations at the Waldorf downtown, intimate photos she had never sent to me, plans for their future together in California. Can't wait until we don't have to hide anymore, she had written. Just a little longer, then you'll have the life you deserve, he had replied. They weren't just having sex. They were planning a life together. They were plotting an exit strategy that clearly didn't include me. There were discussions about real estate in San Diego, about how much they could expect from liquidating assets, our assets. But I didn't slam my laptop closed. I didn't throw things or punch walls like some character in a daytime drama. Instead, I opened a new spreadsheet and created headers. Date, time, message content, location, money spent. Then I began to catalog everything methodically, detachment washing over me like a cold shower. The analyst in me taking control when the husband in me wanted to scream into the void of our empty house. 3 hours later, I had compiled the initial database of their betrayal, categorized and cross-referenced for maximum utility. You see, I'm not the kind of man who loses control. I'm the kind who gains it. The next morning, Grace came home at 7:30 a.m., hair still damp from a shower taken elsewhere. Her perfume was different, not the Chanel No. 5 I had given her for our anniversary, but something sharper, more contemporary. She looked surprised to see me at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, dressed for work in my charcoal suit and navy tie. "You're up early," she said, setting down her overnight bag, the small Louis Vuitton weekender I had bought for her birthday 2 years ago. Her voice carried the fake brightness of someone with a secret, the same tone people use when lying about surprise parties or concealing terminal diagnoses. "Couldn't sleep well," I replied, sliding a cup of coffee her way across our marble countertop. "Made you some breakfast. Avocado toast the way you like it." The bread was perfectly toasted, the avocado sliced rather than mashed with just the right amount of red pepper flakes. Details matter. They always have. Confusion flickered across her face. I hadn't made her breakfast in months. Neither of us had made those small gestures in too long. The intimacy of everyday kindness had been another casualty of whatever was happening between us. She hesitated before sitting down, as though suspecting a trap. She said cautiously, taking the cup. Her wedding ring caught the morning light. 3 carats, emerald cut, white gold band. An extravagance we couldn't afford when I proposed, but I had saved for 18 months to buy it anyway. "About last night, major project deadline," I interrupted, my voice neutral, understanding. "I get it. Cole's always been demanding during campaign season. The next level pitch must be intense." Relief softened her features. She believed I was still blind, still trusting. The corners of her mouth relaxed from their tense position. "Exactly. We're pitching to next level tech next week, and everything has to be perfect. The whole team was there until midnight." The lie slipped from her lips so easily that I wondered how many others had preceded it. How many nights had I believed similar stories? How many times had I nodded sympathetically while she constructed her parallel life? The ease with which she fabricated details was almost impressive. A creative director indeed. "Must be stressful," I said, watching her closely, noting the way she avoided extended eye contact. The micro expressions that most people miss were clear signals to me. The slight tightening around her eyes, the minimal flaring of her nostrils, the barely perceptible increase in her blink rate. It is, she sighed, slipping into the role of overworked marketing executive with practiced ease. But it could mean a huge promotion if we land it. Next Level is expanding their Chicago presence, and they need a marketing team that understands the local landscape. For both of you, I asked innocently, stirring my coffee, though it needed no further mixing. You and Call, I mean, would you both get promoted? A pause, just a microsecond too long. Her fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around the coffee mug. A handmade ceramic piece from that pottery class she took last summer. Another activity I now wondered about. For the team, she recovered. Everyone would benefit from landing an account this size. I smiled and stood up, gathering my briefcase. Genuine leather, a gift from her parents when I made senior analyst. Well, I believe in you. Always have. I kissed her cheek, noting how she stiffened slightly. Her skin smelled of unfamiliar soap, something with sandalwood notes that we didn't have in our bathroom. Dinner tonight? I could pick up from that Italian place you love. Salvatore's still does that mushroom risotto you're crazy about. Sure, she said, looking slightly bewildered by my attentiveness. That would be nice. Around 7? 7 it is, I confirmed, heading for the door. Have a good day, sweetheart. Hope the Next Level prep goes smoothly. As I drove to work in my leased BMW, I formulated my plan. Not one born of rage or jealousy, but of cold, calculated strategy. If I had learned anything in my 15 years analyzing financial markets, it was that information was power, and I needed more information before deciding my next move. The financial analyst in me knew that acting on incomplete data was the fastest way to catastrophic outcomes. My father, himself a corporate attorney before retirement, had always emphasized the importance of comprehensive intelligence gathering before taking decisive action. That evening, I brought home pasta from Salvatore's, her favorite wine, a Barolo we had discovered on our honeymoon in Italy, and even flowers. Grace looked at the bouquet of lilies with suspicion when I presented them. They were her favorites, something I hadn't remembered in at least 2 years. The last time I brought flowers was when we lost the second baby. What's all this for? She asked, running her fingers over the delicate white petals in the crystal vase I had selected. I shrugged, maintaining casual body language while setting the table with our best dinnerware. The Wedgwood set from her mother. Do I need a reason to treat my wife? Consider it a rain check for our anniversary dinner. She froze momentarily, then recovered. She had forgotten completely. Our anniversary? Ethan, I'm so sorry. Work has been so crazy that I completely... It's fine, I interrupted, keeping my tone light. We'll just celebrate tonight instead. No harm done. She studied me as she twirled pasta around her fork, the silver utensil catching the candlelight. You've been different lately. Different how? I took a sip of wine, watching her over the rim of my glass. The Barolo was excellent, notes of cherry and leather with a tobacco finish. I don't know, more attentive, less distracted. She set down her fork. More like you used to be, I guess. I reached across the table and took her hand, the same hand that had likely been on another man's body hours before, the same hand that had composed those messages I'd read. I forced myself to keep my expression neutral, even warm. My thumb traced over her knuckles, over the wedding ring that now seemed like a prop in an elaborate play. Maybe I just remembered how to appreciate what I have. Her eyes flickered with what might have been guilt, but it was quickly replaced by a calculating look I had never noticed before our relationship began its decline. Had it always been there? Well, I like it, she said, squeezing my hand before releasing it. It reminds me of when we first started dating. Remember that weekend in Door County? Of course I remembered. 3 days in a lakeside cabin, barely leaving the bedroom except to watch the sunset from the porch. I nodded. How could I forget? You wore that blue sundress that drove me crazy. She smiled, a genuine expression that momentarily transported us back to simpler times. And you tried to cook fresh fish, but nearly burned down the cabin. The smoke detector was oversensitive, I protested with a laugh. For a moment, we were us again. Then her phone buzzed on the counter, and though she didn't check it, her eyes darted toward the sound. The spell broke. Reality reasserted itself. We finished dinner with pleasant but superficial conversation. That night, she claimed to be too tired for intimacy. I said I understood completely. As she slept beside me, her breathing deep and even, I stared at the ceiling and continued plotting my response. My father had always told me that revenge was a dish best served cold. I intended to serve it frozen. Over the next 2 weeks, I maintained my facade of the attentive, clueless husband while I dug deeper. I discovered that Call had been expensing their rendezvous to the company. Hotel rooms listed as client meetings, dinners filed under business development. The Waldorf had over $500 per night, dinners at Alinea and Ever that approached $1,000 with wine pairings. The man wasn't just a cheater, he was a thief. The audacity of it almost made me laugh. He was using company money to finance the destruction of my marriage, charging their romantic getaways to the corporate account, while his own marriage and mine crumbled under the weight of their deception. Working at a financial firm gave me certain skills and access. Under the guise of helping with a corporate systems upgrade, Hammond and Pierce occasionally consulted for smaller companies like Grace's firm. I gained temporary access to their company's accounting software. What I found was even worse than I'd imagined. Call had been systematically embezzling from the company for years, small amounts that added up to a substantial sum, creative accounting that hid withdrawals under legitimate-seeming expenses, dummy vendors that funneled money to personal accounts. And Grace's signature was on some of the documentation. Whether as willing accomplice or unwitting pawn, her name was there, in black and white, on fraudulent expense reports and doctored invoices. The digital trail was subtle but unmistakable to someone with my training. Whether she knew about the financial impropriety or not, she was implicated. This changed everything. What had been a simple case of infidelity was now potentially criminal. The stakes had risen dramatically, and with them, the scope of my potential response. This was no longer just about a betrayed husband seeking emotional justice. This was about criminal activity that could have serious legal ramifications. The analyst in me recognized a shifting paradigm when I saw one. I continued my performance at home. Breakfast in bed on Sundays, Belgian waffles with fresh berries one weekend, eggs Benedict the next. Surprise lunch dates at her office, where I would shake Cole's hand and make small talk while looking for tells in his body language. The slight sweat on his upper lip, the too firm handshake, the way his eyes never quite met mine when he asked about our recent anniversary. Each night, I updated my spreadsheet, adding new evidence, new patterns, constructing a web of data that would be impossible to dismiss as coincidence or misunderstanding. Then I made an anonymous call to the company's compliance hotline, providing just enough information to trigger an internal audit, just enough threads to start unraveling their carefully constructed facade. I disguised my voice, mentioned specific account numbers that would raise red flags, then hung up before the conversation could continue for too long. The seed was planted. The effect was immediate. Grace came home on a Thursday evening looking pale and tense. Her normally impeccable makeup couldn't hide the strain around her eyes. Her Burberry trench coat was buttoned incorrectly, a detail so unlike her that it immediately signaled her distress. "Everything okay at work?" I asked, concern in my voice as I handed her a glass of wine. Merlot, her favorite, from that small vineyard in Napa we had visited 3 summers ago. She took a large gulp before answering, leaving a crimson lipstick mark on the crystal rim. "There's some kind of internal investigation happening, accounting irregularities or something. Everyone's on edge. They brought in external auditors today without warning." "Including Call?" I asked casually, stirring the risotto I was preparing for dinner. The wooden spoon moved rhythmically through the creamy rice, the motion meditative and grounding. Her eyes snapped to mine. "Why do you ask about Call specifically?" I shrugged, adding another ladle of hot broth to the pan. "He's the department head, right? Must be stressful for him. Ultimately, everything falls under his responsibility." "Right," she said slowly. "Yes, he's concerned. The CFO called him into a closed-door meeting this afternoon. He was in there for hours." "Sounds serious," I commented. "Corporate investigations can get messy. Remember when Hammond and Pierce discovered that junior analyst was trading on insider information? Complete bloodbath. Multiple departments affected." She paled further, setting down her wine glass with a shaky hand. "I'm sure it's nothing that dramatic. Probably just some procedural review." That night, she received 17 text messages from him. I know because I counted them in our cloud backup. They were panicked, discussing what to do if certain documents were discovered. In one, he mentioned our exit strategy and the Cayman account. Another referenced moving up the timeline and getting out before this explodes. A third contained the words, "They're looking at the next level documentation." I read each one carefully, adding them to my growing database of evidence. My hands never shook. My breathing remained even. I was beyond emotion now, operating in a realm of pure logic and consequence. The messages confirmed what I had suspected. Their affair was interwoven with financial misconduct, each transgression reinforcing the other in a symbiotic relationship of betrayal. It was time for phase 2. Finding Amanda Sanders wasn't difficult. She had a public profile on several social media platforms, an interior design business with an impressive portfolio, charity committee memberships, fitness class check-ins at an exclusive health club. I crafted a careful message suggesting we meet to discuss a matter of mutual concern. I attached just enough evidence to make it impossible to ignore. A single text message screenshot, a hotel receipt, but not enough to reveal the full scope of what I knew. A delicate balance between revelation and restraint, enough to ensure she would come, not enough to give her time to formulate a counter-strategy. We met at a coffee shop in a neighborhood far from where either of us lived, a neutral territory in Bucktown where neither of us would likely encounter someone we knew. She was exactly as I remembered her from those dinner parties, poised, elegant, with a sharpness in her eyes that suggested she was nobody's fool. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her makeup minimal but precise. She wore a wedding ring that matched the one on Cole's finger, the symbol of a commitment he had thoroughly betrayed. Her Prada handbag and impeccable Armani suit projected success and control, even as her world was about to shatter. "I almost didn't come," she said as she sat down across from me. No preamble. Her voice was steady, cultured, with the faintest trace of a Minnesota accent she had mostly erased. "I appreciate that you did," I replied, pushing a cup of coffee toward her. Black, no sugar. I remembered her preference from those dinner parties. The attention to detail that had made me successful professionally now served me in more personal warfare. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. Her hands remained folded on the table, not a tremor in sight. Amanda Sanders was not a woman who crumbled easily. "About 2 months with certainty. Suspected longer. The patterns became unmistakable around Valentine's Day, when Grace claimed to be at a marketing conference in Milwaukee." She nodded, processing this. "There was no conference. Call told me he was meeting clients in Detroit that weekend." She took a sip of coffee, leaving a perfect lipstick imprint on the white porcelain. "And you're telling me because you deserve to know. And because what began as an affair has evolved into something potentially criminal. Something that could affect you financially and legally." Her eyes widened slightly, the only crack in her composed facade. "Explain." I slid a folder across the table containing printouts of expense reports, hotel receipts, and some of the more damning text exchanges. The dossier was meticulously organized, tabbed for easy reference, highlighted to draw attention to the most relevant details. "Your husband has been using company funds to finance their relationship. And there's more. Systematic embezzlement that goes beyond just the affair. Fake vendors, inflated expenses, possibly offshore accounts. I've identified at least $300,000 that's been misappropriated over 3 years." She flipped through the documents, her expression hardening with each page. When she looked up, there were no tears, just cold fury that transformed her attractive features into something almost predatory. "I thought he was just working late, building his career." She laughed bitterly. "I even defended him to my friends when they said he seemed distant. I told them he was dedicated to his work, that we were partners in his success, that our lifestyle was the result of his brilliance and hard work. What a fool I've been." "I know the feeling," I said quietly. "Grace told me the same things, that the late nights were about advancing our future, that the business trips were building our security." Amanda closed the folder and placed her perfectly manicured hands on top of it. The French manicure gleamed under the coffee shop lights. "What do you want, Ethan? Revenge? Money? Why not just go to the police with this?" "Justice," I said simply, "and a clean break. Going directly to authorities would limit my control over the situation. I want to ensure that both of us are insulated from any potential fallout. That requires strategic timing and comprehensive evidence. By the time our coffee cups were empty, we had formed an alliance. Amanda had access to financial records I couldn't reach. She had personal knowledge of accounts and passwords that would be valuable to my investigation. She promised to deliver them to me within the week. As we parted, she gripped my hand firmly, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. "They thought we were the fool," she said, her blue eyes boring into mine. "Let's show them how wrong they were. I'll contact you within 48 hours. True to her word, 5 days later, an encrypted email arrived with documents showing the full extent of Cole's scheme. The evidence was damning. Bank statements, transfer records, account numbers in the Caymans and Belize. Grace's involvement was more significant than I'd initially thought. Her signature appeared on multiple falsified reports. There were emails where she explicitly discussed moving funds and covering tracks. In one particularly damning exchange, she suggested adjusting a quarterly report to hide a suspicious transfer. Another message included her ideas for creating a shell company to funnel marketing contracts through, with kickbacks to offshore accounts. My wife wasn't just an adulteress. She was a criminal conspirator, the woman who had once treasured honesty above all other virtues, who had ended friendships over perceived lies, who had nearly divorced me 5 years ago when I failed to disclose a gambling problem that cost us $5,000, had become someone I didn't recognize. Or perhaps, more disturbingly, someone I had never truly known. The gambling incident had been my wake-up call, the moment I recommitted to our marriage and to absolute transparency. Apparently, Grace had drawn different conclusions from that crisis. I took everything to a lawyer specializing in white-collar crime. Lawrence Thornton had handled several high-profile embezzlement cases and came highly recommended by a colleague who had weathered his own divorce scandal. After reviewing the evidence for 3 hours in his downtown office, he looked at me gravely across his mahogany desk. "You realize this will destroy her career, possibly send her to prison." His voice was matter-of-fact, neither encouraging nor discouraging, simply stating consequences. "I'm aware," I said calmly. The thought should have disturbed me more than it did, but I had moved beyond emotion to a place of clear-eyed certainty. The woman I had married was gone, if she had ever existed at all. And your own reputation could suffer by association. These situations often result in social and professional collateral damage, even for the innocent party. I'm prepared for that. My firm already knew about the situation. I had confidentially informed my direct supervisor to get ahead of any potential blowback. Hammond and Pierce valued my work enough to weather minor public relations concerns. He studied me for a moment, tapping his Mont Blanc pen against a legal pad filled with notes. "Most people in your position just want a divorce, and maybe some alimony. This is thorough, almost forensic in its detail." "I'm a thorough person," I replied. "It's what makes me good at my job. When someone betrays not just our marital vows, but possibly the law, half measures seem inadequate." That weekend, Grace announced she needed to go on an emergency business trip. Cole had apparently called an all-hands meeting at a resort in Michigan to strategize about the audit. The Grand Hotel on Mackinac Island, a luxury resort that closed to regular guests for their corporate retreat. I wished her good luck and helped her pack, suggesting comfortable outfits for what would undoubtedly be long work sessions. I even helped her select appropriate jewelry for the formal dinner, mentioned on the itinerary she showed me. An itinerary I knew to be fabricated. The performance continued, each of us playing our assigned roles, the concerned husband, the dedicated professional. Neither acknowledging the growing chasm between us or the tremors that suggested everything was about to collapse. While she was gone, I emptied our joint accounts, leaving only enough to avoid triggering immediate suspicion. I transferred our investments into accounts solely in my name. I filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences, and had the papers ready for when she returned. I changed the passwords on our shared accounts and credit cards. I contacted a real estate agent about listing our house. Methodically, I dismantled the financial structure of our marriage, the way she had dismantled its emotional foundation. Each transaction was a brick removed from the edifice we had constructed together over 11 years. But the real coup came on Monday morning when Cole was escorted out of the building by security, followed by 2 police officers. The company's audit had found enough evidence to press charges. The criminal investigation had begun sooner than I anticipated, accelerated by information Amanda had provided directly to the CFO. By Monday afternoon, Grace was called back from the retreat for questioning. Their Paradise Island getaway cut, dramatically short by the intrusion of consequences. She called me in a panic. "Ethan, something terrible is happening. Cole's been arrested. The police want to talk to me. I don't understand what's going on." Her voice was high-pitched, breathless, verging on hysteria. The composed marketing executive replaced by a frightened woman facing real consequences, perhaps for the first time in her life. "Where are you now?" I asked, my voice calm, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt at hearing the fear in hers. I leaned back in my office chair, gazing out at the Chicago skyline from my window. The city continued its business, indifferent to our personal drama. At the police station, they're letting me make a call before questioning. "Ethan, I'm scared. This is all some terrible misunderstanding." "Stay calm," I advised. "Tell them you want a lawyer present before answering anything. That's your right." Professional advice delivered with the detachment of someone reading from a manual. "But I haven't done anything wrong," she protested, her voice rising. The desperation in it was almost convincing. Had I not seen the evidence with my own eyes, I might have believed her. She had always been persuasive. It made her excellent at her job. "This has to be some kind of mistake. They're talking about financial irregularities and fraud. I'm in marketing, not accounting." There was a pause where I could have told her I knew everything, where I could have unleashed all the hurt and betrayal I'd felt, where I could have said that her lies were as transparent as glass, as numerous as stars, where I could have described the evidence mounted against her in perfect detail. Instead, I simply said, "Then you have nothing to worry about." When she came home that night, released on her own recognizance pending further investigation, she found me sitting at the dining room table, divorce papers neatly arranged before me. Next to them was a printout of her text messages with Cole, hotel receipts, and bank statements showing the money trail. A comprehensive dossier of deception laid out with the precision of a museum exhibit. The lighting was deliberately arranged, overhead chandelier dimmed, table lamp positioned to highlight the documents. The setting designed for maximum dramatic impact. The color drained from her face. "You knew." Not a question, a realization. "I knew," I confirmed, my voice level. "For how long?" She remained standing, still wearing her coat, as though afraid to fully enter what had once been our shared sanctuary. "Long enough to document everything. Long enough to make sure you and Cole face consequences for every line you crossed. Every promise broken. Every fund misappropriated." She sank into a chair, her legs seemingly unable to support her. Her designer handbag fell to the floor unheeded, her coat unbuttoned, but still on. "It wasn't what you think. Cole manipulated me. He said he would ruin my career if I didn't help him. I was afraid. He threatened me." The words tumbled out, a practiced defense likely rehearsed during the drive home. "Is that the story you're going with?" I asked, almost curious. "That you were coerced into an affair and financial fraud? Because the text messages paint a different picture. Can't wait to start our new life once this all blows over. Should we look at the house on Coronado or La Jolla? The Cayman account hits 7 figures today." That doesn't sound like someone under duress. Tears began to stream down her face, leaving tracks through her carefully applied makeup. The mascara she had reapplied after her police questioning now created dark rivulets down her cheeks. "What do you want from me, Ethan? Money? Public humiliation? What will make this go away?" "Nothing," I said truthfully. "I don't want anything from you anymore. The divorce papers are there. Your things should be packed and gone by the end of the week. The house will be sold and any proceeds after the mortgage will go toward your legal fees. You'll need them. Lawrence Thornton is expensive, but he's the best white-collar crime defense attorney in Chicago. I took the liberty of setting up a consultation for you tomorrow morning." She stared at me, mascara running down her cheeks. "How can you be so cold? After 11 years together, after everything we've been through, the miscarriages, your gambling problem, my father's death, how can you just discard me like this? The same way you could lie to my face day after day. The same way you could plan to leave me while sleeping in our bed. The same way you could commit fraud using accounts linked to our joint assets, putting us both at risk." I leaned forward slightly. "We all have capabilities we never knew about until tested. You discovered you could betray. I discovered I could strategize. "You're ruining my life," she whispered, her voice breaking. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table. "No, Grace. You did that yourself. I'm just making sure you don't ruin mine in the process. Sign the papers. They're generous considering the circumstances. You keep your personal possessions, your car, and enough to secure legal representation. Given the evidence against you, it's more than fair." 2 days later, I received an unexpected visitor. Melanie, Grace's best friend and confidant, stood on my doorstep looking uncomfortable. Her normally bubbly demeanor was subdued, her usual bright clothing replaced by muted tones that matched her somber expression. The woman who had been a fixture at our dinner parties and holiday celebrations now looked like a stranger. "Can we talk?" she asked, shifting her weight nervously from one foot to another. I let her in, curious about her purpose. We had never been close, Melanie and I. She was Grace's friend, not mine. But I had always been polite, accommodating, the perfect husband in her eyes, I suspected, though perhaps that perception had shifted in recent days. She sat rigidly on the edge of our couch, my couch now. Her eyes darted around the room, noting the already packed boxes, the spaces where Grace's decorative touches had been removed. "I know what Grace did was wrong," she began. "Which part?" I asked. "The adultery or the fraud?" She winced. "Both, all of it. But there's something you should know. Something important that might affect the legal proceedings." I waited, saying nothing. Patience had become my greatest weapon. The silence stretched between us, uncomfortable but revealing. People will fill a silence if you let them, often with more information than they intended to share. "They were planning to take everything," she said finally. "Once Carl got his promotion next month, they were going to clean out your accounts and disappear. They had it all planned out. Grace had already packed up anything of value that she could sell without you noticing. Jewelry, collectibles, even that first edition Hemingway your grandfather left you." I absorbed this information with a strange sense of detachment. The Hemingway was safely in my office desk drawer, removed when I first became suspicious. "And you're telling me this now because?" Melanie looked down at her hands, fingers twisting together nervously. "Because I helped her. I let her store things at my place. I listened to their plans and said nothing. I even helped her research countries without extradition treaties, thinking it was just some marketing project. And now Cole's been arrested and Grace is facing charges, and I realized how far this has gone, how completely I've been manipulated." "Are you worried about being an accessory?" I asked, a legitimate concern, given what she was admitting. "I'm worried about being a terrible person," she said, meeting my eyes. "I've known you for 10 years, Ethan. You didn't deserve any of this. And neither did Amanda. Neither of you deserve to be discarded like outdated appliances while they built new lives with your money." "Did she ever say why?" I asked, the question emerging unbidden. The analytical part of me needed to complete the data set, to understand all variables in the equation. Was there something specific that made her decide to destroy our marriage? Or was I just an inconvenience to be discarded? Melanie hesitated. "She said you had grown apart, that you were more interested in your spreadsheets than in her, that the passion was gone." She twisted her silver bracelet nervously. "But honestly, I think it was the lifestyle. Carl promised her travel, excitement, a more glamorous life than the one you two had built. Villas in Europe, yachts in the Mediterranean. After the second miscarriage, she said something changed in her, that she realized life was too short to be merely comfortable when she could be extraordinary." I nodded, accepting this, the final piece of the puzzle sliding into place. "Thank you for your honesty." I recorded our entire conversation, with Melanie's knowledge and consent. It became another piece of evidence in the growing case against Grace and Carl, another nail in the coffin of their plans. When she left, she paused at the door. "For what it's worth, I always thought you were good for her. Stable, dependable. The kind of man most women would be grateful for." "Apparently stable and dependable became boring and predictable," I replied without bitterness. "Valuable lessons in all this, I suppose." The company pressed charges for embezzlement. The amount was close to $300,000 over 3 years, spanning multiple projects and clients. The district attorney added fraud and conspiracy charges. Amanda filed for divorce and provided additional evidence of Cole's misconduct, including unauthorized transfers from their personal accounts. The legal machinery, once set in motion, moved with a momentum all its own. Statements were taken, evidence cataloged, charges formalized. Grace was arrested the following week. The police came to the extended stay hotel where she had been living since leaving our house. When she called from the detention center, I answered out of curiosity more than anything else. Perhaps a part of me needed to hear her voice one last time to confirm that the woman I had loved truly no longer existed. "You won," she said, her voice hollow. "Are you happy now? Have you satisfied your need for vengeance?" "This wasn't about winning," I replied. "Then what was it about? Punishment? Revenge? Making me suffer for hurting your pride?" "Consequences," I said simply. "You and Call lived as if your actions wouldn't have any, as if the rules that govern ordinary people didn't apply to you. This isn't vengeance, Grace, it's accountability." "We had something real once," she said, her voice breaking. "Before all of this. You and me, we were good together. Remember our trip to Maine? The lighthouse at dawn? The way you held me when I lost the baby? That was real, Ethan, no matter what came after." "We were," I acknowledged, "until you decided we weren't. Until you decided that our life together wasn't enough. Until you chose to betray not just me, but yourself. The Grace I married wouldn't recognize the woman you've become. The silence stretched between us, filled with all the things we would never say to each other again. The apologies that would never come. The explanations that would never be sufficient. The might-have-beens that would never materialize. "I have to go," she said finally. "My lawyer's here." "Goodbye, Grace." I hung up and felt nothing but a profound sense of completion, as if a chapter had closed, a book had ended. I sat in our living room, my living room, and realized I no longer felt the presence of her ghost. The memories were fading, replaced by a clear-eyed vision of the future. My future, without the woman who had nearly destroyed it. The house already felt different, cleaner somehow, as though a toxin had been removed from its environment. The legal proceedings dragged on for months. I testified when required, provided evidence when asked, and otherwise focused on rebuilding my life. I sold our house for a modest profit and moved into a waterfront apartment with a view of Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the horizon, minimalist furnishings that held no memories of my previous life. I left my job at Hammond and Pierce and started consulting for companies on financial security and fraud prevention. Ironically, my experience had given me a unique perspective that proved valuable in the corporate world. My rates were high, my client list exclusive. From personal catastrophe, I had forged professional triumph. Companies now sought me out for my specialized knowledge of how intelligent professionals hide financial malfeasance. My tragedy had become my expertise. Call received 6 years for embezzlement, fraud, and various financial crimes. The judge was particularly harsh given his position of trust within the company and the methodical nature of his crimes. Grace, despite her attempts to portray herself as an unwitting accomplice, was sentenced to 3 years. The judge was particularly unimpressed by text messages where she actively discussed hiding funds and creating false documentation. "These are not the actions of someone under coercion," he said during sentencing. "These are the calculated decisions of a willing participant. Your attempts to shift blame demonstrate a continued unwillingness to accept responsibility for your actions." I attended the sentencing, sitting silently at the back of the courtroom. Grace looked back at me once, her eyes filled with a mixture of anger and despair. I met her gaze steadily, neither gloating nor apologetic. We were strangers now, connected only by the legal proceedings that were severing our final ties. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the gravity of her situation. The confident marketing executive replaced by a woman facing the consequences of her choices. 6 months after Grace's sentencing, I bought a small sailboat and named it New Balance. 32 feet of gleaming fiberglass and polished wood, a vessel designed for both solitude and occasional company. On quiet evenings, I would take it out onto Lake Michigan and watch the sunset paint the Chicago skyline in gold and crimson, the water soothing beneath the hull, the wind cleansing as it filled the sails. Sometimes Amanda would join me. Our shared experience had created a bond between us, though not a romantic one. We were two people who had survived the same storm and occasionally needed to remind ourselves that we'd made it to shore. Her interior design business was thriving now that she had redirected the energy once spent on her marriage toward her career. One evening, as we drifted near the harbor, the city lights beginning to twinkle as dusk deepened, she asked me a question I hadn't considered. "Do you regret how thoroughly you went after them? You could have just divorced her and moved on, walked away with your dignity intact without all the legal complications. I thought about it as the gentle waves rocked the boat. The question deserved serious consideration. They weren't just betraying us emotionally, I said finally. They were stealing, lying, breaking laws and vows with equal disregard. Walking away would have felt like validating their belief that they could do anything without consequences, that the rules don't apply to special people like them. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. Some people think we should be more forgiving. My sister thinks I should have just taken the settlement and kept quiet about what I knew. That pursuing justice made me seem vindictive. Forgiveness is personal, I replied. It doesn't preclude justice. You can forgive someone while still holding them accountable for their actions. The two aren't mutually exclusive. We watched as the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the horizon, leaving us in the gentle blue of twilight. In that moment, I felt neither triumph nor regret, just the quiet certainty that I had refused to be a victim in someone else's story, that I had reclaimed the narrative of my life from those who would have reduced me to a footnote in theirs. As the months passed, I began to date again, cautiously at first, then with growing confidence. I found that my experience had not made me bitter, merely discerning. I valued honesty above all other traits, transparency above all other gestures. The women I dated commented on my directness, my clarity about what I wanted. The ordeal had burned away any pretense or gamesmanship from my approach to relationships. Occasionally, news of Grace would reach me through mutual friends. She was serving her sentence at a minimum security facility in Kentucky. She had joined a prison education program, teaching marketing skills to other inmates. She had written letters of apology to former colleagues whose careers had been affected by the scandal. Whether these were genuine attempts at redemption or calculated moves to improve her situation, I couldn't say. And truthfully, I no longer cared. Her life was her own now, as mine was mine. Our paths, once intertwined so completely that I couldn't imagine separation, now diverged completely. On the anniversary of our divorce, I received a letter from her. I recognized her handwriting on the envelope, the graceful loops and curves that had once signed birthday cards and love notes. The postmark from Kentucky confirmed its origin before I even opened it. I held it for a long time, considering whether to open it or simply discard it unopened. The past reaching into the present, asking for acknowledgement. Curiosity won out. Inside was a single page, filled with her distinctive script. "Ethan," it began, "I know you have no reason to read this, let alone believe anything I say, but I want you to know that I understand now what I lost. Not just my freedom or my career, but the life we built, the trust we shared, the foundation that could have supported us through anything if I hadn't been so blinded by what I thought I wanted. The grass that seemed greener was artificial all along. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that you were right about consequences. They're inescapable, as they should be." It was signed simply Grace, no longer claiming the surname we had once shared. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not prominently displayed, not immediately discarded. Just another artifact from a life I no longer lived. Another piece of the past, cataloged and filed away where it could neither harm nor haunt me. Life moves forward, always forward, and so do I. If you like this story, please click the hype button. This video deserves to be popular. Have a nice rest.